A sharp sound of shattering glass pierced the cozy evening bustle of Golden Spoon restaurant. Guests flinched. Some glanced over. Others dropped their gaze, as if pretending not to see would erase the embarrassment hanging in the air. Amid the shards of broken glass, a young waitress knelt down, her trembling hands carefully picking up each jagged piece. On her cheek, a bead of sweat mixed with something far heavier, shame. This is the third time this month. Morgan, it's coming out of your paycheck. The harsh voice rang through the room. It was Frank, the restaurant manager. Arms crossed, lips curled into a smirk that carried no trace of forgiveness. The girl, Samantha Morgan, bowed her head and softly replied, "I'm sorry. Frank, I'll be more careful." Her voice was so faint, she wasn't even sure she'd heard it herself. But it was the only choice she had. A broken glass or a broken spirit, neither could cost her this job. Not when her mother, Eleanor Morgan, lay immobile at home, dependent on daily medication that insurance barely covered. Not when her meds cost more than rent. Not when every paycheck was a lifeline thin, fragile, keeping her mother tethered to this world. Samantha was 27. No one noticed the calluses on her hands that once belonged to a promising med student specializing in pediatric neurology. No one knew that. Just 4 years ago, she graduated top of her class. Or that her professor once told her, "Good doctors heal illness. But you, Samantha, you heal hearts." Everything changed the day her mother collapsed in their aging apartment. The diagnosis, progressive multiple sclerosis. Life didn't give her a warning. It just split down a different path. She withdrew from school, took off the white coat, put on an apron, and stepped into a world of minimum wage shifts, where kindness was seen as weakness, and devotion was called a waste. Frank didn't like her, because she didn't fake smiles when customers were rude, because she had the nerve to ask why her tips were always short, because she wasn't as pretty as Jessica, the 19-year-old Frank always favored with the good shifts, even though she constantly snuck out to text her boyfriend. But Samantha had no choice, because for her, every shift was a dose of medicine for her mother. Every skipped meal was a sacrifice to keep the lights on in their apartment. And every humiliation she endured was so someone else could stay alive. That evening, she rushed from one table to the next, her feet throbbing from standing since noon. And Jessica, she was texting, then asked for a 20-minute break. An hour passed. She never returned. Frank didn't say a word. 9:17 p.m. A new table was seated, table 7. A well-dressed man in a suit, sitting with a little girl in a wheelchair. The girl's face was half hidden beneath her bangs, her shoulders tensed as if afraid of even the air around her. No one wanted that table. The other servers quietly sidestepped. Disabled children meant extra patience, extra time, and smaller tips. But Samantha walked over. She knelt down to meet the girl's eyes and smiled as if this was the best thing that had happened all night. "Welcome to Golden Spoon. What's your name tonight? I'll be your personal server." And with just that sentence, that look, that smile, She had no idea her life was about to change forever. Because the man across the table wasn't just any customer, and the girl in the wheelchair was the key to leading her back to the path she thought she'd lost. Samantha walked away from table 7 with a soft smile still on her lips, unaware of the icy stare behind her Frank, who never missed a chance to score a power play. She darted through the crowd, balancing 3 plates at once, left hand pouring water, right hand returning a credit card. She was used to this. Her body had become a machine forged by 6 shifts a week, 12 hours a day. No insurance, no benefits. She wasn't allowed to be tired, wasn't allowed to make mistakes, wasn't allowed to fall. In the break room, a new schedule had just been pinned to the wall. The servers clustered around, chirping like little birds. Samantha waited for them to leave before stepping forward. She scanned the list of her name from top to bottom, her chest tightening. 3 night shifts, no daytime hours, less than half her usual schedule for the week. "Frank, something's wrong with the schedule," she called out as he walked into his office. "It's not wrong. We're overstaffed. Had to cut shifts," he replied without looking back. "But I'm the only one working full-time. I've been on these shifts for over a year." Frank kept his eyes on the screen. "Jessica needs rent money. She asked for more hours. I cut yours. Jessica lives with her parents. She just bragged she's going to Cancun next week. Not relevant. Schedule's final. 1 sentence. Slammed every door shut." Samantha walked away, her legs aching and her stomach hollow. She didn't have the time or strength to argue, because even when she was right, no one ever took her side. Jessica returned from her date with her boyfriend, cheeks flushed, lipstick still smudged. "Thanks for covering for me," she said, as if granting a favor. "I told you it'd just be 20 minutes. Samantha didn't respond. She couldn't. She had to get back to table 7, where the little girl in the wheelchair was still waiting for her first proper meal since the accident that took her ability to walk. Samantha knew it. She recognized the signs. Right side motor dysfunction, hypersensitivity to sound, avoidance of eye contact, all the markers she once studied, once tested on, once practiced treating. As she served the meal, Samantha noticed Emma, the little girl, struggling to scoop food with her spoon. Each time she tried, her hand trembled and the food fell back onto the plate. "I'm sorry," the man, Lucas, said quietly, glancing anxiously at his daughter. "Could you maybe help her a little?" Samantha pulled up a chair and sat down, her eyes level with Emma's like a real pediatric doctor. "When I was in med school," she said gently, "they taught us that the body is a very smart machine, but sometimes the wires from the brain to the hand get a little scrambled." Emma blinked, looked at her. "Your brain is amazing. Your hands just need a little more time to catch up, that's all." She guided the girl in how to hold the spoon simple, patient, no pity, no awkwardness. Emma smiled, just a little. But it was real. It was the first time a traumatized child had smiled, in 18 months. And Lucas, the father, sat in stunned silence, watching it happen. 9:42 p.m. Samantha had just helped Emma get her first spoonful of food into her mouth. The little girl nodded slightly, then smiled and suddenly whispered, "Were you really a doctor?" The question made Samantha freeze. For a brief moment, she felt as if she was still wearing a white coat, standing in a university hospital, not in the noisy kitchen of Golden Spoon. "I used to study to become a children's doctor," she replied. "Then my mum got sick. I had to stop everything." Emma looked up. For the first time, her eyes didn't shy away. From across the room, Lucas watched like he was witnessing something unimaginable. His daughter, talking, eating, smiling at a stranger. But in the kitchen, another storm was brewing. Frank stood at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes locked on table 7. "What the hell are you doing over there?" he barked as Samantha walked back to the dish pickup area. "I was serving a guest. The little girl needed help. This isn't a therapy center. You sat at a table for over 30 minutes, abandoning other guests. Do you have any idea how that affects table turnover? I still managed all my tables." Meanwhile, Jessica ditched her shift for an hour. "Don't drag others in to cover your own incompetence, Morgan." Frank stepped in close, his face inches from hers, the cheap cologne and stale coffee on his breath hitting all at once. "Next week, I'm cutting your shifts to 2. 1 lunch, 1 dinner." Samantha stood frozen. 2 shifts. She couldn't survive on 2 shifts a week, and she definitely couldn't afford her mother's medication. "You know my situation." "My mum." "Your mum isn't Golden Spoon's responsibility." Frank cut her off, his tone icy. "Jessica's young, cute, customers like her. You play nurse, talking to crippled kids. That wastes time and loses money." That last line felt like a knife, not because it was unfair, but because, in this world, it was brutally real. Frank tossed an envelope into her hand. "Tonight's tips. Don't expect much." Samantha knew she'd served no fewer than 25 tables, but the envelope held only $43. Too little. Ridiculous. But there was no one to complain to. Frank was the rule. Frank was the ceiling of her world. That night, Samantha left the restaurant in her worn-out shoes and stepped into the parking lot, where her old Honda waited. She collapsed over the steering wheel. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Only a choking silence swelled in her throat. $43 for a 10-hour shift. And a warning. "Next week there's no place for you here anymore." She had once stood in an operating room, once listened to the heartbeats of children through a stethoscope, once dreamed of opening her own clinic. Now, she sat in a dark parking lot, clutching an envelope as hollow as her dreams. At home, her mother, Eleanor, was asleep. Beside the bed sat a prescription she couldn't afford. On the fridge hung an unpaid electricity bill. She knew. Tomorrow morning she'd have to wake up, tie on that apron again, and carry herself like everything was okay. But what she didn't know was that that very night, someone had seen everything. Someone who wasn't just any customer, but the real owner of Golden Spoon. And that person had just made the decision to change her life. The next morning, Samantha woke up early, as always. She set a glass of water beside her mother's bed, checked the medication schedule, then opened her laptop to search for a new job. But the browser was still on an old tab, Monroe Medical School's student portal, where she had once been a second-year med student. A bold notice flashed across the screen: application closed, special research fellowship, Department of Pediatric Neurology. She opened her email. One unread message from 3 weeks ago, from Dr. Winters, the mentor who had once begged her not to drop out. It was brief, but made her heart pound. The fellowship just reopened. I convinced the board to accept a late application if it's from you. Call me. Urgent. Her hands trembled as she typed a reply. She knew the deadline had passed, but still she hoped for a miracle. Yet the miracle arrived, in a completely different form. 600 a.m. A soft knock on the door of her tiny apartment. Samantha opened it to find a sharply dressed courier holding a cream-colored envelope. Miss Samantha Morgan. Yes, signature. Please. She signed, still stunned. There was no return address, just a name embossed in elegant gold: Bennett Enterprises, Chicago. Inside was a short, handwritten letter and a business card: Lucas Bennett, CEO. Bennett Restaurant Group, Golden Spoon, is one of the restaurants I own. Last night, you didn't know who I was. But I saw everything. The way you treated my daughter is something no team of therapists has been able to do in the past 18 months. At 900 this morning, a car will come for you if you're willing to hear what I have to offer. At the bottom of the letter was a handwritten note in blue ink. Emma hopes you'll say yes. She still has a few questions about neural signals. Samantha was stunned. She had to read it 3 times before believing it wasn't some kind of prank. Lucas was the CEO. Emma was his daughter last night. She had spoken to them like any other customers, completely unaware that she had been serving the top executive of the entire restaurant group. And now he wanted to meet with her personally. 900 a.m. A sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building. A female driver stepped out and opened the door without saying a word. Samantha wore her old interview outfit, a deep navy blazer, a white shirt, the only formal clothes she had left from her hospital internship days. She sat in the car, clutching her bag tightly, heart racing. What was this? A test? A gift? Or some kind of trap? The Bennett Enterprises tower loomed like a glass fortress in the heart of the city. A private elevator carried her up to the 40th floor, where Lucas Bennett was waiting. But he wasn't the first person she saw. Emma, the little girl, sat at a breakfast table, her face lighting up the moment Samantha stepped in. "You really came. I told them you would. I couldn't say no to such an important invitation," Samantha replied with a soft smile. Emma pulled out a chair for her, then pointed at a croissant. "The raspberry filling is the best, but my dad likes the chocolate one more." The morning air felt strangely peaceful. For a moment, Samantha forgot why she was even here. A little girl who once wouldn't speak, wouldn't smile, was now chatting as if they were lifelong friends. And then the door opened. Lucas entered, still in his elegant suit, the calm face of a businessman. But his eyes softened the moment they landed on his daughter. "Sorry to keep you waiting." There were a few things at Golden Spoon that needed urgent attention. Lucas said as he stepped in, "You invited me here because of Frank?" Samantha asked cautiously. "Because of Frank. And because of you," Lucas replied, his gaze steady and fixed on her. In that moment, Samantha realized this meeting wasn't just a thank you. It was a door opening wide, offering her a way back to the path life had once forced her to abandon. Breakfast on the 40th floor didn't involve champagne or gleaming silver cutlery, just warm croissants, jasmine tea in porcelain pots, and a little girl talking to a woman she had only met the night before, but already trusted enough to share everything. Emma broke her pastry in half, nibbling as she chatted non-stop about her unfinished drawing, the robot dog she saw on YouTube, and how she used to draw with her right hand but now had to relearn everything with her left. "Everyone feels sorry for me, but I don't want anyone to be sad. I just want to draw again." Samantha sat still, not because of what Emma said, but because of how she said it, naturally, fearlessly, openly, without hiding. The same little girl who had curled into herself in a noisy restaurant the night before was now giggling and scrunching her nose at the slight bitterness of ginger tea. "My dad said, 'You used to be a real doctor.'" "Not quite yet," Samantha replied with a soft smile, "but hopefully someday soon." "Then will you be my doctor?" The question, half playful, half earnest, stole Samantha's breath. Before she could answer, Lucas reappeared, now dressed in a crisp suit and tie, CEO mode fully activated, but the way he looked at his daughter still carried the awe and tenderness of a father, both surprised and moved. "Emma, ready for your tour. Angela's waiting for you on the 38th floor." Emma hesitated, eyes locked on Samantha. "Are you going to ask her to work with me, Emma?" Lucas raised an eyebrow. "I'm just asking. I think she should be a doctor again. She's really good at it." The little girl skipped away, leaving the two adults in a long silence. Lucas turned to Samantha. His face no longer held the polite smile of earlier. "Last night was the first time in 18 months that I saw my daughter smile. I didn't do anything special." Samantha whispered, "You did something no therapist, no psychologist, no private tutor ever managed to do. You made my daughter feel seen, feel normal, and free to be herself." Lucas pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to her. "I visited Golden Spoon last night to conduct an unannounced internal audit. I didn't tell anyone who I was, and what I saw was a complete failure in management, but also a major opportunity in talent." Inside the folder were altered timesheets, manipulated tip records, surveillance notes documenting how Frank discriminated, cut shifts, and rigged the schedule. Samantha felt the blood drain from her face. She had known Frank was unfair, but she hadn't realized how deep it ran. You were his primary target. Lucas continued. "You worked more, earned more, yet always received less. And last night he gave you $43 when your actual total for the shift was nearly $140. Samantha clenched her fists, not out of rage, but from something even more painful than anger, that hollow feeling of being robbed while no one noticed, and no one believed you. "I'll deal with Frank," Lucas said firmly. "But that's not the only reason I asked you here. I asked you because I don't think you should be serving tables anymore. You should be serving something greater, something that once belonged to you, and can again." He pulled out another folder, dark blue, embossed with the Monroe Medical School logo. Samantha gasped. "How? How did you know Dr. Winters is an old friend? I only had to mention how you explained the nervous system to my daughter, and she immediately guessed your name. She sent me your full file." Samantha sat still on the 40th floor of a glass tower, but her mind spiraled back to dorm rooms, anatomy labs, and the research paper she once wrote on pediatric developmental disorders. Lucas looked at her this time with complete sincerity. "I want to help you return to that path. Not out of pity, not as a favor, but because you deserve it." No knock, no warning. The glass doors suddenly flew open with a loud shove. Frank Peterson, manager of Golden Spoon, stormed in like a thunderstorm of rage and confusion. His shirt wrinkled, hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot with fury. "She's really here. What the hell is going on behind my back?" Lucas remained seated, turning his head calmly, chillingly composed. Samantha stood up instinctively, body tense. Frank stared at her like she was the reason his world was collapsing. "What lies did you tell him? Trying to steal my job. Now I see what this is. A crippled kid, a cheap waitress. You two really put on quite the performance." The room froze. Only the sound of Frank's ragged breathing remained, and the cold fire slowly rising in Lucas Bennett's eyes. He stood. No yelling, no threats, just one sentence, measured and clear. "You're speaking to my daughter, and to an employee I personally invited here. Choose your words wisely. Peterson, this is no longer your restaurant floor where you can yell at people unchecked." Frank stiffened. His eyes darted around, only now realizing he wasn't in some backroom office. He was standing in the headquarters of Bennett Enterprises, where all the power he thought he had meant absolutely nothing. "You don't understand the full situation," Frank blurted. "Restaurant management is complicated. Tips, schedules, staffing." Lucas cut him off, softly. "Skimming tips is complicated. Altering payroll, discrimination, deliberate schedule cuts also complicated." Frank flushed red, sweat beading on his forehead. "I was just doing what needed to be done to keep performance high. She's always meddling, talking to customers like she's some kind of doctor." Lucas placed a folder on the table and slid it toward Frank. "These are the actual shift logs compared to your altered timesheets, tampered tip reports, testimonies from other employees about abuse of power. I have it all." Frank took a step back. "You can't do this. I've worked here over 6 years. I know that restaurant better than anyone else." Lucas nodded calmly. And that's exactly why I'm late in realizing you've turned a restaurant that was once a warm, welcoming place into one where good people are pushed down." He looked over at Samantha, his eyes softening, then turned back to Frank, voice deepening, effective immediately. "Frank Peterson, you are terminated from the entire Bennett Enterprises network. Security will escort you out and collect your keys and employee ID." Frank stammered, shouting, but 2 security staff had already entered quietly. They gently, but firmly, motioned him toward the exit. His angry outbursts faded down the long glass hallway. Samantha remained still. She didn't feel triumphant, only hollow, like years of tight-held tension had finally been pulled out of her chest, leaving only a stunned silence in its place. Lucas turned to her, his expression now not that of a CEO, but of someone who had known loss and understood it deeply. "Now then, Miss Morgan," he said slowly, "let's talk about your future, not in a restaurant, but in the place you were meant to be medicine." Samantha blinked. For the first time in years, she didn't have to beg for shifts, didn't have to defend herself, didn't have to apologize for caring too much. For the first time, someone saw her, truly saw her. The door clicked shut behind Frank, taking with it the last echo of an unjust system finally dismantled. Inside the conference room on the 40th floor, only 2 people remained: Samantha the waitress, who had just been insulted, and Lucas Bennett, the wealthy man who had just broken the silence to restore her dignity. Lucas sat back down and opened a second folder, sliding it gently across to Samantha. Dark blue cover, familiar logo, Monroe Medical University, Re-Entry Program Department Pediatric Neurology, approved for full scholarship. Samantha froze. I don't understand. The deadline already passed. I submitted late. It's no longer an issue, Lucas replied. I spoke with Dr. Winters. She didn't need convincing. She just needed to know that you still believe you deserve this. Samantha opened the folder. Inside was an official admission letter, full scholarship details, and even a living stipend that would cover her entire time in school. Her heart pounded, struggling to keep up with everything happening. But my mom, she needs 24/7 care. I can't go back to school and leave her alone. Lucas nodded gently and pulled out a third set of documents. Bennett Enterprises has a residential program for staff with special medical caregiving needs. Unit B14, 12th floor. The building next door to mine has been arranged under your mother's name. She'll have a dedicated caregiver, physical therapy support, and medication monitoring per her doctor's schedule. Samantha brought her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. She looked at him, eyes filled with both disbelief and gratitude. Why are you doing all this for me? I'm just a waitress who happened to be assigned the right table. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then Lucas opened a fourth folder this time. It wasn't documents. It was a child's drawing. In the picture, 3 people stood in front of a tall building. Dad, Sam, Emma. At the bottom, in wobbly but heartfelt handwriting, my family fixed me. Now we can fix other kids, too. His voice caught. After the accident, Emma stopped speaking. She didn't smile, wouldn't eat unless forced. We hired dozens of the best doctors, but none of them made her feel safe. Until she met you. You didn't try to fix her. You saw her, and that alone changed everything. Tears welled in Samantha's eyes, not from pity for herself, but because, for the first time in years, someone had finally said aloud the one belief she'd never stopped holding on to. That compassion is part of medicine, not something you have to trade away. Lucas continued, I'm not buying your gratitude. I don't want your loyalty. I just want to put a good person back in the place the world once stole from her. The rest, it's your choice. He slid all 3 folders toward her. 1. Restaurant manager role. High salary. Full benefits. Immediate start. 2. Join the Bennett Public Health Initiative. Bring care to underserved communities. Use your medical knowledge. Earn even more. 3. Return to Monroe Medical School. Full scholarship, housing, stipend, and a clear path to becoming a doctor. Samantha's voice trembled. I don't want to be someone who was just helped. I need to know. I'm worthy of it. Lucas smiled for the first time, truly relieved. I knew you'd say that. And if you hadn't asked that question, maybe I would have picked the wrong person. She didn't answer right away. She asked for a moment alone. He nodded, pointing to the glass doors leading out to the balcony on the 40th floor where the wind howled and the city stretched endlessly below. Samantha stepped out. Her hand gripped the icy railing. She took a deep breath as if it was the first one she'd taken in years that matched her own heartbeat. Wind swept over the 40th floor. Samantha stood at the edge, the city below sprawling like a maze without exit, just like her life had felt for the past 4 years. Somewhere beneath those glowing windows, mothers were being cared for, students were studying, children were sleeping peacefully. And her, who was she? A med student interrupted, a daughter clinging to her mother's survival, or a waitress who'd just been handed the chance to rewrite her life. Samantha closed her eyes. Emma's image appeared. The trembling spoon, the soft smile, and that innocent question, "Will you be my doctor?" She opened her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her gaze wasn't pulled backward by the dark. When she re-entered the room, Emma had returned busy coloring a picture with a purple marker. Lucas looked up, his face full of quiet hope, but said nothing. Samantha approached, sitting down across from the father and daughter. Her voice was steady and clear. "Before I give you my answer, I need to make one thing very clear." Lucas nodded. "Go ahead. If I accept the scholarship and return to med school, it has to be because I deserve it, not because you're looking for someone to help Emma. I can't be a savior. I'm not a private doctor, and I will not be anyone's redemption project." Lucas smiled, not the kind of polite, diplomatic smile, but one that said he truly understood. "I don't need you to be anything, Samantha. I just need you to be yourself, to live up to the potential, the passion, and the dream you once had." She turned to Emma, still focused on coloring, pretending not to listen, though the flush in her ears gave her away. "And if I help you learn about neural signals, the brain, and how to control your arms and legs. It'll be because I love teaching, because I see someone smart enough to understand, brave enough to ask, and special enough to change her world. Emma looked up, her eyes glowing. So, you'll really become a doctor? Samantha nodded for the first time in her life, with complete certainty. I'm starting over, and if you'll let me, maybe you'll be the biggest reason I don't give up this time. Emma grinned, and the entire room lit up with her smile. Lucas said nothing, letting the moment breathe. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. 12th floor apartment. A nurse has already been assigned. Your mother, Ms. Eleanor, will begin physical therapy next week. Samantha took the key in silence, resting her hand over her chest, where her heart beat fast, but no longer from fear. That day, on her way out of the building, she stopped by the pharmacy to pick up her mom's medication, not with a maxed-out credit card like all the times before, but with new insurance, filed under Bennett Enterprises, dependent Eleanor Morgan, back home. Eleanor was napping. Samantha placed the meds on the table, pulled down the old stack of unpaid bills taped to the fridge, and pinned up a fresh calendar. Start date, Monroe Medical, next Monday. Below that, she scribbled a quiet note, not going back for the past, stepping forward for the future. 1 year passed like a dream rewritten by real, human hands. Samantha walked briskly through the glass halls of Monroe Medical, arms full of colorful files, white coat fluttering behind her. She was no longer the weary waitress with dark circles from night shifts. She was now a final-year student in pediatric neurology, class president, full scholarship recipient, lead researcher in post-traumatic motor recovery, and the only student whose weekly calendar had a handwritten note Saturday: teach Emma anatomy with Lego. Her life hadn't returned to what it was. It had become something she'd never dared to dream of. Her mother, Eleanor, lived on the 12th floor, just one elevator ride away from Lucas and Emma. She no longer needed the wheelchair all day. With new physical therapy, she could cook, read, and even knead dough for apple pie, Emma's favorite. They had dinner together every Sunday. They called it family, not by blood, but by bond. That day, after class, Samantha received a message from Dr. Winters. "Stop by my office after your lecture. Someone's waiting for you." She entered, expecting academic business, but there sat Lucas, no suit this time, just a dad in a grey sweater, smiling gently like always. "Is Emma okay?" "Did something happen?" she asked, concerned. "Quite the opposite," he replied. "Emma is more brilliant than ever." He slid a yellow folder across the desk toward her. Embossed logo on the cover. The Emma Bennett Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation. Samantha opened the folder. Inside were full-color blueprints, floor plans for therapy wings, a sensory zone for children with autism, and an art therapy room, complete with a display wall for Emma's paintings. "It's really being built," she whispered. "The board approved the funding yesterday," Lucas said. "In 18 months, it'll open right next to Monroe Medical. Doctor. Winters smiled from behind her desk. And we need someone special to lead it. Not just a skilled doctor. Someone who understands the emotions behind every wound. Samantha was stunned. But I haven't even graduated. When the center opens, you'll be a resident, Lucas said gently. And after that, medical director, if you're ready. Do I have to answer now? No. He smiled. But Emma might ask you tonight. When she arrived home, Samantha found a crayon drawing on the kitchen table. 3 figures stood in front of a large building with a sign that read, Emma's Hospital below it, in uneven but confident writing. My family fixed me. Now we can fix other kids, too. She didn't need another invitation. That night, the 4 of them, Eleanor, Lucas, Emma, and Samantha, sat together for dinner. Main course lasagna. Dessert homemade apple pie. Emma raised her glass of orange juice. To the future Dr. Sam, you have to promise the center has its own art room for me. Samantha laughed through her tears. I promise. And that room will hang your very first painting. Lucas placed a hand on her shoulder. You saved her. But more than that, you gave us a family we didn't know we needed. And Samantha understood. Sometimes, family isn't made from blood, but from bold choices, from a spoonful of mac and cheese, from a first smile after trauma, from someone who still believes in her dream even when the world already gave up on it. 18 months later, where there once was an old hospital parking lot behind Monroe Medical, now stood a glowing glass building, the Emma Bennett Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation. The entrance curved in bright, bold colors, each one representing a region of the child's brain. Every hallway was a tiny world, from smart floor movement therapy zones to the art room filled with paintings by patients themselves. And in the center of the main hall, etched into a white stone wall in bronze letters, sometimes a small act of kindness becomes a lifetime of healing. On opening morning, Samantha stood backstage holding her handwritten speech. Her white coat was perfectly pressed, but her heart was still fluttering. She was no longer a student, no longer a tired intern trying to impress. She was now medical director, the youngest ever appointed at Monroe. But more importantly, she was leading a place that wasn't just about healing illness, it was about restoring hope. Lucas appeared beside her, like always, holding 2 cups of coffee, one for the doctor, one for someone still shaking like a first year. Samantha laughed, taking a cup. Where's your daughter? Picking ribbon colors for the ceremony. She's changed dresses 3 times, and she walked unassisted for 12 full minutes this morning. His eyes shimmered. Samantha went quiet. She remembered the timid girl who once trembled holding a spoon, now giving a school presentation on neural signals explained with Lego bricks. Lucas looked at her, voice low and full of pride. You didn't just save Emma. You made a place like this exist. And most importantly, you made people believe that kindness is a form of strength. Samantha said nothing. she stepped onto the stage, before hundreds of guests, doctors, children, families, and media. But the only eyes she looked for were Emma's, beaming in the front row, wearing a tiny white coat, holding up a sign, "Let's fix more kids." Samantha began. 3 years ago, I was a waitress, a girl carrying food trays, hiding a dream she thought life had stolen. One night, I helped a little girl eat dinner, not because it was my job, but because I saw myself in her eyes. She paused. The front row went still. From that moment, everything changed. Not because I was given a handout, but because I was seen, and I was believed in. She raised her ID badge on the back. In Emma's handwriting, Dr. Sam, the real superpower is compassion. After the ceremony, Samantha led the first group of children through the center's front doors. A boy with a chemo line tugged her sleeve. "Are you really the doctor here?" "No," she winked. "I just walk with little superheroes. They're the real reason this place exists." That evening, in the 12th floor apartment, Eleanor opened a bottle of homemade apple cider. Emma brought the pie to the table. Lucas turned on his favorite classical song. And in that quiet moment, they were no longer broken pieces. They were home. Family isn't always blood. It's built in every sacrifice, every lift, every moment someone dares to choose life all over again. Samantha looked around, the way her mother's eyes lit up when she smiled, the way Lucas told stories like a father still learning how to be one, and Emma focused on writing Christmas wishes on 40 cards for pediatric patients. They were once broken pieces. Now they were a whole picture. 3 months after the center's grand opening, a 6-year-old boy named Jonah, paralyzed on one side from a car accident, took his first steps across the therapy room. No applause, no theatrics. But behind a one-way mirror, Samantha watched the timer, looked up, and smiled. The kind of smile worn by someone who's learned not to expect miracles, but to patiently sow seeds. In the next room, Emma was helping a young girl draw on an iPad with her left hand the same way she had once learned herself. Eleanor, ever the honorary supervisor, sat knitting in the hallway, ready to hug any child who cried from the pain of physical therapy. Lucas stood in his glass office, a cup of tea in hand. He didn't interfere. He didn't manage. He simply was there like a father who had learned that healing doesn't come from control, but from quiet presence. The Emma Bennett Center wasn't just filled with high-tech machines. It had one sacred rule: every child who comes here has the right not to be perfect. Not every kid would walk again. Not all would fully recover. But every child would be heard, called by their name, looked in the eyes, and told, "You don't have to be like anyone else. Just be you, and I'll walk with you." One day, a group of med students came for clinical rotations. Their professor led them into the staff lounge, where Samantha was updating therapy notes. A young student raised his hand. "Dr. Morgan, I read your background, and I just wanted to ask, What made you return to medicine after being away so long?" Samantha set her pen down, eyes warm. One meal, one little girl who didn't speak to anyone, one spoonful of mac and cheese. She smiled softly, and one father who had enough faith to invest in something he could never buy: true kindness. The room fell silent. I didn't come back because I was strong. I came back because someone saw what I had forgotten, that I had the power to heal just by showing up, wholeheartedly, in the right moment. That night, Emma handed Samantha a letter, handwritten, each line firmer than the last. "Dear Ms. Sam, if I hadn't had the accident, we might never have met. But now I feel lucky I know you, because you were the first person who didn't see me as broken, but as smart. I want to be a doctor like you, but if I can't, I'll be an artist for our center, because you once said helping one person is enough, but if you can, help more with the very thing you once lacked. I'll remember that. Emma." Samantha folded the letter and placed it in a small wooden box where she kept things that aren't files, but matter most. She looked out the window, city lights beginning to glow. Another child was walking toward the center, holding his mother's hand, eyes nervous, feet unsteady. Samantha rose. "What's your name, Ezekiel?" he whispered. She knelt to meet his eyes, extending her hand. "Welcome to our center, Ezekiel. We don't have magic here, but we have Ms. Eleanor's apple pie, Emma's art room, and a team who believes in you more than anyone else ever has." He took her hand, slightly trembling, but warm. One spoonful of mac and cheese, one first smile, one quiet act of kindness with no audience. All of it had become a legacy, not of wealth, but of empathy, not of fame, but of dignity. If you've ever thought, "I'm just one person, what difference can I possibly make?" Remember Samantha Morgan, a girl who dropped out of med school, who cried behind kitchen counters, who survived on stolen tips just to buy medicine for her mother, who once believed her dream had died with one sentence: "You're off next week's schedule." But then, on a night that seemed like any other, she sat beside a disabled girl and offered a spoonful of mac and cheese, not out of duty, not for a paycheck, but because she saw a child who deserved to be seen. And that moment, unwitnessed by the world, became the one that changed everything. Lucas Bennett, a father who had lost his wife and nearly his faith in healing, saw something that no resume could describe: true kindness, true understanding, true healing. He didn't hand Samantha a golden ticket out of poverty. He gave her back the right to dream, not of fantasies, but of a future built with quiet resilience. From a 12th floor apartment with warm meals and a waiting mother, to an art room where children learn to believe in their legs again. And somehow, those small, quiet things, a dinner shift, a smile, a sincere lesson, became the foundation of a multi-million-dollar medical center where thousands of children would rise, draw, and reclaim their stories. No one carved Samantha's name onto a national honor wall. But if you asked Emma, the girl who once trembled from spinal trauma, now walking across the room in a radiant white dress, she would point to Samantha and say, She's the reason I believe in myself again. If you've ever served someone and no one noticed, held the door and weren't thanked, did the right thing when no one was watching, believe this kindness never disappears. It only waits for the right moment to become a light that never goes out. And maybe, like Samantha, you're not just changing a moment, you're rewriting an entire life, your own and someone else's. Share this story, not because it's touching, but because someone right now needs a reason to believe they still have a chance. And if you've ever been a Samantha or met one, leave a comment that says, "I choose kindness," even if no one sees, because maybe you are the smallest spoon that makes the most important meal in someone's entire life. We won't all become doctors, but each of us can be the first to listen, the first to sit beside a child who needs to be understood, the first to believe that even one small act can change a life. If you're wondering whether your kindness matters, this story is your answer. Yes, it does. Always. Just don't stop.